Hey guys, tonight we're sinking our bare feet into the squishy, sun-warmed banks of an ancient river, the Euphrates, to be exact. The mud between your toes is soft, cool, and strangely alive with tiny crustaceans, and the air smells like wet soil, goat fur, and something faintly metallic. You crouch near a reed basket, a few pebbles in your hand, watching a herd of sheep shuffle by in the shimmering heat. You're here to count, of all things. You don't have a calculator, not even a number system, really, just instinct, smooth stones, and some damp clay that sticks to your fingers like peanut butter on toast. You're in Sumer, around 3200 BC, and while it may not look like it yet, something big is about to happen. Not war. Not religion. Something quieter, messier, more mathematical. And yeah, you probably won't survive this world, between heat stroke, snake bites, and the daily risk of being conscripted to build yet another temple, but your ideas just might. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere interesting, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing who's drifting off where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into the village with the sun hammering your shoulders. The river has receded just enough to reveal the fine, tacky clay that makes your chores possible. It's perfect for what you need today, recording a trade. You're a herder, and you've just handed off 5 sheep to a grain farmer who'll repay you in barley next week. Trouble is, you've already forgotten if it was 5 sheep or 6. Or was it 4? Memory's slippery, especially when you're malnourished and mildly sunburnt. So you reach into your pouch and pull out 5 small pebbles. Each one is a sheep. Obvious, right? But also brilliant. You put them in a little clay container, a round lump with a small hole. This, believe it or not, is the first glimpse of accounting, abstract representation of physical goods, stored and reviewed later. It's not art. It's not religion. It's practical magic. Mainstream history tells us this is how it began. Neolithic people started trading in larger, more complex ways, and oral tradition just couldn't keep up. Enter clay. Wet, plentiful, moldable, and hard as a rock once baked in the Mesopotamian sun. Add a few pebbles and you've got a ledger, one you can hold in your hand. Now, here's the weird bit. Some of these token containers, called bully later on, have been found buried beneath buildings, never opened. Historians still argue whether this meant they were symbolic trust contracts, spiritual offerings, or just early bankers forgetting where they put their savings. Either way, these closed clay balls were the blockchain of their time, immutable, hard to tamper with, and annoyingly easy to lose. Imagine yourself hunched over a clay slab in a thatched hut, pressing each pebble into a soft ball of clay, sealing it shut, then inscribing something on the outside, maybe a symbol for cheap, maybe a scratch that only you and your neighbor understand. There's no Rosetta Stone yet, just habit and community memory. And fingers. Lots of grubby fingers. You don't think in terms of numerals, but you know what 5 looks like. You feel it. You can see 5 goats. You can see 5 baskets of dates. You can see 5 bruises after arguing with your brother. This kind of concrete thinking lays the groundwork for abstraction. And abstraction is everything. It's why you can sit here 5,000 years later with a glowing screen, wondering how a bunch of sweaty farmers invented Excel. Fringe theory time. Some researchers think this counting method was first used for ritual trades, offerings to gods, or tributes to chieftains, not just mundane stuff like barley. That's right, your spiritual life may have been itemized before your economic one. The divine goat, accounted for and stacked with the others. Here's another kicker. Some clay tokens weren't just pebbles. They were shaped, cones for measures of grain, spheres for animals, cylinders for labor. These weren't just placeholders. They were symbolic language in 3D. You could literally feel the economy in your palm. Try that with a debit card. By the time you finish your day's work, you're surrounded by tiny figures and damp clay lumps. Your fingers are stained a deep ochre, your knees ache from crouching, and you're starving. But when your neighbor comes over next week with 3 jars of beer, you can shake your head slowly, hand over the clay ball, and grunt until he realizes, "No, buddy. You owe me 5. This is the birth of accountability. Not in the moral sense, though that's coming, but in the literal sense. You are counted. Your labor is tracked. Your debts are real. And for the first time, you don't need to remember every detail. The mud remembers for you. You fall asleep that night with clay under your nails and the ball tucked beneath your mat. Outside, the jackals yelp. Inside, 5 pebbles rest silently in their orb, waiting to speak the truth when the sun rises. You wake up to the familiar scent of damp earth and the distant bleating of sheep. The clay ball from last night is still under your sleeping mat, warm from your body heat and slightly squished at one side. You pull it out and roll it in your hands. 5 pebbles inside. 5 sheep. You nod. Simple. But your neighbor has a problem. See, he's got 5 different trades going this week. Barley to the fish guy, sheep to you, some date wine promised to the temple. And he's carrying around all these little clay balls like a confused juggler. Every trade has its own container. Every container its own set of tokens. His satchel jingles like a sad, dusty maraca. You both sit under the awning, swatting flies and trying to remember who owes what. This is the moment when pebbles stop being just pebbles. You press your thumb into the clay again, this time trying to press a pattern into the outer surface, a symbol that might mean barley, or goat. Your neighbor leans in. He tries it too. Suddenly, the outside of the ball matters as much as the inside. It's a breakthrough. You're not just storing information anymore. You're displaying it. Mainstream scholars agree that this shift, from pebbles as internal record to markings on the outside, is what cracked open the door to writing. And it happens because of a problem so relatable: information overload. The city is growing. Trade is booming. People are bartering everything from fish oil to obsidian blades to dyed wool. And the old 1 pebble per goat system? Yeah, it's starting to break down. You need more detail. More nuance. And also, your arms hurt from carrying around 5 pounds of clay balls. So you adapt. You streamline. Instead of sealing the tokens inside a ball, someone, maybe you, maybe your cousin, starts just pressing the tokens into a flat slab of clay. Now you've got the same information, just easier to read and easier to store. It's like switching from floppy disks to cloud storage. Except the cloud is your hut's dirt floor. This is the proto-tablet, and it's catching on fast. Imagine walking through the village. The fishmonger has a slab on the wall with tally marks. The brewer's assistant is stamping little cone-shaped markers into a clay sheet to show how much beer got ladled out that morning. Everyone's house has at least 1 tablet drying in the sun. They're not decorative. They're declarations. Like bumper stickers that say, "I still owe 3 chickens for that fence post." Here's a fringe tidbit that always gets ignored in dusty textbooks. There's evidence that some tokens were also dyed. Red for livestock. Black for grain. Blue if you're feeling extra. Historians still argue whether this was an aesthetic choice, a way to prevent fraud, or just Sumerians being surprisingly vibey for accountants. Anyway, back to you. Your neighbor's satchel is lighter now. He's got 1 slab, not 5 balls. But suddenly he's worrying about the slab breaking. What if it rains? What if a goat steps on it? What if the symbols fade? So, naturally, someone invents baking. Yep, they stick the tablets in a kiln, or even just a hot fire pit. Clay hardens. Records become permanent. This is where accounting really locks in. You're not just remembering for a week anymore, you're creating records that last decades. Maybe longer. Maybe forever. And it's addictive. You find yourself using tokens for everything. You track how many fish your cousin catches. How many days you spend helping build that ridiculous ziggurat. How many jars of date syrup go missing from the temple stores. Hint, it's always the priest's nephew. Each thing gets a token. Each token gets a symbol. Your world becomes measurable. It's worth pausing here and admitting something. This system isn't fair. Not everyone understands the symbols. Not everyone gets to write them. Only certain people, scribes, usually tied to temples, learn the full system. They become the keepers of knowledge, the controllers of memory. You, dear herder, might invent a symbol for one sick goat, but unless it catches on with the bigwig scribes, it's just chicken scratch. But you try anyway. Because that's what humans do. We push. We personalize. We pebble our way toward permanence. One day, a trader from another city-state shows up. He's never seen your symbols before. You try to explain. He doesn't get it. So you give him the slab, hand sign the quantity, and he nods slowly like he might not cheat you. You both laugh. Awkwardly. Trade complete. That night, under the stars, you can't help but smile. You use clay. You use pebbles. You use the visual language that's still forming. And somewhere in that exchange, you realize you're doing more than tracking sheep. You're creating a system. A system that can grow. A system that will outlast you. You're half asleep when a low chant rolls through the village. Deep, rhythmic, annoyingly early. Temple dawn prayers. You groan, stretch, and shuffle outside, where robed figures are already hauling baskets of grain toward the ziggurat. The air is thick with incense and dust. A priest passes you, nodding as if to say, "Yep, we're doing divine spreadsheets again today." Because now it's not just trades between neighbors. It's not just you and your sheep. It's the temple, the granary, the tax collector. And things are about to get organized, terrifyingly so. You watch a line of workers file into the temple's outer courtyard, each one clutching a small offering, jars of oil, fish wrapped in reeds, bundles of leeks. One by one, they hand their items to a scribe seated cross-legged behind a clay-covered desk. The scribe doesn't even look up. He just records. Tally, tally, symbol, press. Another clay tablet joins the pile. This is your first real glimpse of institutional accounting. And yeah, it's as dry as the desert wind that blows through your tunic. But also, kind of amazing. Historians agree that temples in ancient Sumer weren't just religious centers. They were economic engines. They controlled land, livestock, food stores, labor. The gods got credit, but it was the priests and scribes who did the math. And they did a lot of math. You wander closer, peeking over the scribe's shoulder. His tablet is covered in wedge-like marks, early cuneiform. Not letters. Not yet. These are still numerical impressions, shorthand symbols for products and quantities. It's a code, sure, but it's not meant to be secret. It's meant to be unchangeable. Because once you press a line into wet clay, it stays there. That's the beauty and danger of it. You mess up a count? Everyone sees. You lie about how many baskets of barley came in? That mark doesn't fade. It bakes into history. So of course, someone eventually invents the eraser. Or rather, the wet clay overwrite. You smear out the mistake and press in new marks. But by then, someone's probably already seen the error. The priest raises an eyebrow. You swallow. Accounting, it turns out, is risky business. Here's a little-known tidbit. Temple scribes kept double records. One tablet for the receiver, one for the supplier. It's a Sumerian version of receipts. Some even had matching notches so you could line them up and verify. Two sides of a deal, two truths carved in clay. Not quite blockchain, but not far off. And if the numbers didn't match? Well, let's just say the god-in-law was said to hate those who falsify weights and measures. Whether that's metaphor or veiled threat is up for debate. Historians still argue whether divine punishment was used mainly to scare scribes straight, or whether they genuinely believed in cosmic audits. Either way, you don't want to fudge numbers under temple authority. You drift into the granary, a massive storehouse that smells like warm dust and old wheat. Clay jars line the walls, each one sealed with a lump of marked clay. One mark for barley, another for volume. Some even bear the name of the farmer who delivered them. You run your fingers over the symbols, marveling at how permanent these records are, like tagging your name on history's wall with nothing but a stick and a good thumb press. The temple doesn't just store food. It redistributes it. And the clay tablets track everything. Who received how much? When? Why? There's even one for temple workers. Your friend, the guy who sweeps the outer courtyard, gets 2 handfuls of barley and 1 of garlic every 3rd day. It's written down. He can prove it. You envy him. In a world where memory is fallible and talk is cheap, clay is law. Of course, some people try to game the system. One scribe tries to, accidentally, add an extra 0 to his cousin's oil ration. Another hides a miscounted sheep behind a wall and says it got sick. You watch it nibbling weeds through a crack. The deception is almost poetic. And that's where the temple starts using auditors. People whose only job is to double-check tablet records. The first middle managers. You groan just thinking about it. Still, you can't help but admire the whole thing. A city that once lived and died by word of mouth now survives on clay. Wet, cracked, crumbly clay. It's beautiful, in a strange bureaucratic way. By now, the temple has developed its own hierarchy of scribes. The youngest ones do tally marks. The older ones write entire ration lists. The elite scribes? They get their own private room. Their own styluses. Their own smug expressions. You dream of joining them one day. Not because you love numbers, but because you want your mark to last. You step outside as the sun crests over the ziggurat, casting long shadows across the city's heart. The wind shifts, and a scroll of dust spirals through the temple courtyard. You look down at your feet and think somewhere under this dirt, a tablet from decades ago still remembers how many goats a man once gave to the gods. And that's the thing about accounting in Sumer. It isn't just math. It's memory. You're halfway through chewing a fig when a young boy sprints past you, tripping over his own feet and landing in the dirt with a muffled oof. He scrambles back up, clutching something round and dust-covered, a clay ball about the size of a fist. It cracks slightly in his grip, and you catch a glimpse of Pebbles inside. He looks at you, eyes wide, and bolts. You sigh. Another kid playing with bully. But then you blink. Because this one isn't just any ball. The outside is etched with curious symbols, more than just tallies. There's a goat, a series of wedge shapes, maybe even a stylized foot. You turn it over in your hands. It's sealed, baked solid. And you realize you're holding an unopened message from centuries ago. These clay spheres, bully, are the strangest artifacts from this era. Imagine mailing a locked vault filled with receipts. That's basically what they were. People would mold hollow clay balls, place counting tokens inside, each representing an item in a transaction, then seal them shut and inscribe the outside. When disputes happened, you could break the ball open and count the tokens inside. Like cracking open a cereal box and hoping the toy's still there. Historians still argue whether the bully were legal contracts, tax receipts, or just glorified IOUs. Some think they had ritual significance, sealed offerings to the gods with a kind of sacred bookkeeping. Others say they were simply a way to outsource memory. A mental sticky note in 3D. You flip the bulla over and see a faint thumbprint near the seal. Someone pressed this, maybe thousands of years ago, with care and pressure. It hits you like a warm gust. This isn't just a record. It's a handshake preserved in clay. Not every bulla got opened. In fact, many were buried beneath building foundations or tucked inside temple walls. Why? Fringe theory alert. Some believe unopened bully were symbolic, like insurance policies. As long as it remained sealed, the deal was trusted. Breaking it meant trust was broken, like opening a friend's locked diary. Risky and probably drama-inducing. There's also a curious issue no one's quite solved. Some bully have more tokens inside than their markings suggest. Did someone make a mistake? Did someone try to fudge a trade? Or did they add extras just to confuse any future archaeologists snooping around in 5,000 years? We may never know, but it's fun to imagine a Sumerian prankster giggling as he sealed up a dozen extra goat tokens. You find a flat stone and set the ball down gently. With a small stick you tap the edge. Crack. Then again. Tap. Crack. Like peeling a very dusty orange. The shell flakes away. Inside? 6 tiny pebbles, cone-shaped. Grain, maybe? It's a grocery list in ancient form. But here's what really blows your fig-loving mind. Someone eventually realized you didn't need the pebbles at all. If the markings on the outside already told the story, why bother sealing the tokens inside? Just stamp the info directly into the clay, skip the ball, and boom, tablets. And that, right there, is the shift from physical tokens to symbolic writing. You watch it happen in your head like an animation. First, a cone pebble for grain. Then a picture of a cone. Then a simplified wedge. Then a stylized symbol etched onto clay. The leap from object to abstraction is pure wizardry. This is how writing is born, not from poetry or epic tales, but from inventory lists and arguments over sheep. You get up and walk toward the temple courtyard, where scribes are practicing on clay tablets. One boy presses a stylus into a slab over and over. Triangle, triangle, triangle. He glances at an older man for approval. The man grunts. The boy sighs and starts over. Welcome to the world's first accounting class. Most people think writing started with storytelling. And yeah, the myths and legends will come. But the first written symbols? Almost all of them are economic. Tithes, rations, transfers, and bully are the halfway point, part calculator, part prophecy. By evening, you've gathered a small collection of broken bully. Each one tells a tiny tale. 2 goats, 5 loaves, 1 measure of beer. Together, they whisper the hum of a living, breathing economy. Not dramatic, not glamorous, but profoundly human. And here's a final twist of clay for your brain. Some scholars believe that the shapes of tokens influence number systems later on. Cone equals 1. Sphere equals 10. Different shapes equals different units. Your geometry homework? It might trace back to livestock math. You wrap the last bulla fragment in a cloth and slide it into your satchel. Not for trade. Not for counting. Just to keep. A relic of a world still figuring out how to remember itself. The stars appear one by one above the ziggurat. You sit by the fire, turning a smooth pebble in your fingers. Tomorrow, you'll press it into clay again. But tonight you listen to the quiet tick of ancient accounting, 1 press, 1 record, 1 truth at a time. You sit cross-legged in the corner of a courtyard, the clay slab warm in your lap, the stylus, a sharpened reed, gripped tight in your fingers. Today's task: mark 5 goats, 6 baskets of barley, and 2 jars of honey. Easy, right? Until you realize your hands cramping halfway through basket number 3. You rub your wrist and sigh. What once took a few pebbles now requires precise symbols pressed in perfect lines. Clay doesn't forgive wobbly fingers. And now, with tokens fading out and scribes rising up, you're not just pressing stuff, you're inventing writing. No pressure. This is the pivot point. The exact moment in history when Sumerians decide, let's stop hiding tokens inside and just draw them on the surface. What begins as a shortcut becomes a revolution. It starts with basic pictographs. You scratch a pointy triangle for a barley cone. You press a circle for a jar. A symbol equals a thing. Done. But then you get clever. You need to show how many. So you draw 2 triangles. Or 5. That gets tiresome fast. Eventually, someone, probably a genius with no social life, comes up with numerical signs. 1 wedge 4. 1. 2 wedges 4. 2. And so on. You just reinvented the number system. Mainstream historians mark this moment, around 3100 BCE, as the birth of true record-keeping. Sumerians go from concrete to abstract, from pebbles to marks, from memory to permanence. And it all happens on wet clay, under the supervision of scribes who take themselves very seriously. You watch one now, a man named Ibisin, muttering under his breath as he scratches out trade details. He's got a big beard and an even bigger ego. He flicks a speck of dust from his tablet like it insulted his mother. You snort. He doesn't notice. What Ibisin and his colleagues are doing is more than counting. They're shaping language. Because as soon as you start marking quantities and items, you realize you need to track names too. Who gave the goats? When? Why? Soon, pictographs evolve beyond inventory. They start representing sounds. A symbol for fish becomes a syllable. A wedge becomes part of a word. And just like that, writing escapes its accounting cradle and toddles into the world of stories, laws, prayers. But for now, it's still mostly business. You try your hand at it, pressing a crude wedge into the clay. Then another. You're not a trained scribe yet, but you feel something shift as you work. A kind of gravity pulling symbols toward sense. And it's addictive. You catch yourself writing your own name, again and again, in the corner of the slab. Like tagging your initials in a tree trunk. Like whispering, "I was here." There's a fringe theory you've heard whispered during market days. Some early scribes used the outer shapes of tokens not just for records, but for magic. They believed the right combination of marks could bring good harvests or ward off sickness. Historians still argue whether these first spells were just superstitious accounting or the roots of written religion. Either way, those symbols had power. And with power comes rules. The temples begin training scribes young. Boys who barely know how to count are dragged into tablet schools where they copy, over and over. Dozens of the same symbols. If they mess up, they get the gentle tap of a stick and a fresh hunk of clay. You pass by one school as a kid mutters, "1 grain basket, 1 grain basket," like it's a sacred chant. Maybe it is. But here's the awkward truth. Not everyone gets to learn. Scribes are male, mostly elite, and temple-bound. If you're a woman, or poor, or just really bad at drawing straight lines, forget it. You'll hand over your goods, and someone else will write it down. You're being counted, not doing the counting. That divide? It's the start of literacy as privilege. Still, the system grows. Now merchants carry tiny tablets in their satchels like ID cards. Barley shipments are signed and sealed with a symbol called a kuduru. Farmers come in at month's end to check that their harvests are recorded accurately. And if something's wrong? Well, the clay doesn't lie. You overhear a scribe telling a story. A man tried to cheat the temple by delivering half-rotten grain. The tablet said, 1 full basket. But the smell said otherwise. The tablet was broken in front of the crowd, the mark erased, and the man shamed. His name? Written on a fresh slab and posted by the granary door. Public accountability, Mesopotamian style. It makes you think. The written mark doesn't just remember, it judges. By the end of the day, your hands are gray with dried clay. Your tablet is rough, but readable. 5 goats. 6 barley. 2 honey. You smooth out the corner and press your makeshift symbol, a crooked wedge with a line. Your signature. It's official. It's history. You wake before sunrise to the low rumble of carts and shuffling sandals. The air is still cool, but the heat is coming. Always is. You stretch, toss some water on your face, and head toward the northern edge of the village. You're not chasing sheep today. You're chasing bureaucracy. Because now, the clay tablets are everywhere. Not just in temples. Not just in granaries. They're in homes, markets, warehouses, city offices. Clay shelves are sagging under their weight. Entire rooms devoted to rows and rows of these baked bricks of information. Filing systems? A bit chaotic. But they've got categories, rations, taxes, deliveries, even sick leave. You don't clock in and out. You clay in and out. You arrive at a tablet archive, a mud brick building filled wall-to-wall with racks and bins of tablets. The air is thick with dust, and the room smells like sun-baked dirt and sour ink. A scribe named Lugalidin greets you with a grunt and a wave toward a stack of yesterday's deliveries. "Make yourself useful," he mutters, already hunched over his latest entry. You dig in. One tablet lists the daily ration for temple workers. 2 measures of barley, 1 measure of beer, half a fish, which, let's be honest, sounds like a nightmare lunch. Another records land plots. Who owns which field, how much tax they owe, whether their irrigation ditches are up to snuff. You spot a few with smudges and crossed out lines. Probably someone trying to quietly revise their "oops, I forgot the goats" moment. This is the golden age of Sumerian administration. Clay tablet usage explodes not because someone wants to write more, but because someone has to. The city's growing. More people, more trades, more temples, more taxes. Paper? Doesn't exist yet. Leather's too expensive. Palm leaves rot. But clay? Clay is cheap, everywhere, and nearly eternal, if you avoid floods. Mainstream historians agree. By 3000 BC, Sumer is running on cuneiform. And it's evolving fast. You flip over a tablet and see it, no longer just pictographs. These are abstract wedge marks now, pressed with styluses at angles. The word cuneiform literally means wedge-shaped. It's less pretty, more efficient. The stylus doesn't draw, it presses. Each mark a directional stab, vertical, horizontal, diagonal. Like little bird footprints across the surface of time. The scribes don't just write, they replicate. Everything gets copied. Daily, monthly, yearly accounts. Grain counts for 3 years back. Tax receipts for goats long since stewed. Historians still argue whether all this duplication was useful or just scribe job security. But one thing's certain, there is no forgetting in this world. Not unless you drop a tablet and oops it shatters. Oh, and you will. Everyone drops a tablet eventually. You once watched a young scribe trip and fall face first into a box of ration records. Clay confetti everywhere. The overseer stared at him like he just kicked a sacred cow. That poor kid had to rewrite every single entry. By hand. From memory. You still tease him about it. There's even a ritual for disposing of outdated tablets. Some are buried. Some tossed into designated scrap pits. Others are simply built into walls. Yes, your neighbor's house might literally be insulated with ancient payrolls. Cozy. Here's a quirky detail no one mentions. Some scribes drew little doodles in the margins. A tiny fish here. A bird there. Even a few crude jokes. You once found a tablet about wheat distribution with a scratched image of a scribe face planting into a pile of grain. Bold of someone to record their own humiliation, but hey, eternal shame has a charm. The best part of your day comes when Lugaliden lets you use his stylus. It's made from a polished reed, worn to a perfect angle from years of use. You press a few neat wedges into a fresh slab, your own ledger. Just practice, but it feels good. Feels official. Like you're joining something ancient and important. Then Lugaliden snorts and says, "Hope you're not pressing goat poop into my tablet." You glance at your hands. They may have touched a goat earlier. You shrug. Ancient accounting isn't glamorous. What's really wild is how dense these tablets are. A palm-sized one can hold hundreds of symbols. And because they're baked, they last. You read one today that's over 30 years old. Older than you. Still perfectly legible. Like time, frozen in mud. The downside? There's no delete key. If you mess up a mark, you have to start over or pray no one notices. Some scribes try smoothing over errors, rewetting the clay. But it always shows. The clay remembers everything. By evening, your back aches and your head spinning from all the barley tallies and tax codes. You slip one small tablet into your satchel, yours, with your wedges. It's not official. But it exists. You made a mark. Literally. As the sun drops and the sky bleeds orange over the rooftops, you walk home through narrow alleys, passing tablet carriers, scribes with styluses tucked behind their ears, kids playing, scribes school, with old broken tablets. And you think, this isn't just record-keeping anymore. It's civilization. You're squatting in the shade of a mud brick wall, the smell of roasting onions wafting from somewhere nearby, when your friend Nisar plops down beside you and tosses a cracked tablet onto your lap. "See that?" she says, jabbing a finger at the wedge marks. "That's my cousin's loan contract. He borrowed 6 goats last month. Still hasn't paid back one." You peer at the tablet, trying to follow the marks. It's all there: lender, borrower, number of goats, repayment date, and even a clause that, judging by the extra pressure on the stylus. Basically says pay up or else. You whistle. That's steep interest, you say. Yep, Nisar replies. 4% per month. He's doomed. Welcome to the Sumerian financial system. If the bullion clay slabs were the bones of accounting, contracts like this are the nervous system, binding agreements between people, enforced not by memory or mutual trust, but by clay. You mess up, the tablet doesn't forget. It's sitting on someone's shelf, drying into permanence, just waiting to say, actually, that wasn't the deal. By now, accounting has become so precise that you almost miss the old days, pebbles and prayer and guessing how many sheep you owed. Now, you owe exactly 6 goats and 1 kid, a baby goat, not a toddler, though you did once try to count your nephew as collateral. It didn't go over well. What's even stranger, people are starting to include interest in these contracts. Not just, you owe me 6 goats, but, you owe me 6 goats plus 1 by next moon. Compound debt. And while mainstream historians confirm the Sumerians didn't invent banks per se, they certainly mastered lending, borrowing, and the gentle art of reminding people they're broke. One tablet from Lagash, an old southern city, lists a loan of silver and barley with the promise of repayment in 12 days. If not, additional interest. And if the debtor defaults again, the contract allows the lender to seize part of the borrower's field. Friendly stuff. And here's a detail that should make your spreadsheet-loving soul quiver. They even had standardized measures. Silas for silver, gur for grain, gin for oil. You don't just say, some barley. You say, 1/3 of a gur of barley, which is roughly 300 liters. That's a lot of barley. And a lot of room for errors, which is why every decent scribe develops a mild obsession with measurement accuracy. You watch Nisar pull out her own stylus and a fresh tablet. She's tracking her cousin's debts now, one transaction at a time, in her own record. Double entry, she says with a wink. Wait, what? Yep. That's a thing now. Not quite like modern double entry accounting, but close. One record goes to the borrower, one to the lender. Or in more complex trades, one for the trader, one for the temple, one for the central archive. Cross-checks, reconciliations, disputes. It's a whole industry. You remember a fringe tale told by an old priest once, a scribe who tried to fudge a loan record by carving it after the deadline passed, pretending it was pre-agreed. He got caught. Not by divine lightning, but by someone who noticed the clay hadn't fully hardened yet. Talk about forensic accounting, ancient edition. You asked Nisar how her cousin will repay the goats. Barley, she says. He's banking on a good harvest. Is that allowed? She shrugs. Sure. As long as it equals 6 goats in value. The tablet doesn't care what you pay with, as long as it's recorded. And that's the heart of it. These clay contracts don't just record numbers, they track equivalencies. 6 goats equals 1 gur of barley equals maybe 10 jars of beer, depending on the brewer's mood. You're watching the emergence of a proto-economy, where value floats between objects but lands solidly in the mud. One scribe even devised a tablet that listed exchange rates: goats to barley, barley to fish, fish to oil. It's like a currency converter, but 100% offline and guaranteed to give you clay splinters. But there's danger too. You've heard of people being imprisoned for unpaid debts. Some lose their land. A few sell themselves, or their children, into debt labor to cover what they can't pay. Historians still argue whether these contracts were truly consensual or thinly veiled tools of economic coercion. Probably both. After all, even in a barter system, someone's always holding the stylus. Still, it's not all doom and deficit. You visit a marketplace later that afternoon, watching a brewer trade beer for wool. No coins, just a quick scribble on a clay tablet and a nod from both parties. You ask if you can read the entry. The brewer holds it up proudly. 2 jars, 1 length of wool, paid within 3 days. Clean. Simple. Efficient. And if the buyer doesn't pay? Well, the brewer says, cracking his knuckles, That's what the tablet is for. That evening, you sit by your hearth, poking your own tiny ledger with a dull reed. You're no professional scribe. But you've started tracking things. How many jars of oil you've traded, how much grain you've stored. Not because you're running a business, but because you could. And as the fire flickers and the night settles in, you glance at your clay sheet and smile. The Sumerians may not have had apps, but they had something better, a system built to remember, and to hold you accountable. The sun's already high when you duck into the brewer's workshop, hoping to escape the heat and maybe, just maybe, score a free sip. Inside, it's musty and sweet, filled with the bubbling scent of fermenting grain and the low hum of bees circling forgotten honey jars. But what really catches your eye isn't the beer. It's the clay tablet pinned to the wall. It's a bar tab. Scrawled in crooked cuneiform is a record of the brewer's regulars, who drank what, how much, and when they said they'd pay. You spot a familiar name. Your cousin. Of course. 10 measures of beer, no payment yet, and a little symbol next to his name that might mean slippery, or don't trust this guy. Welcome to the world's earliest IOUs. This tablet isn't ceremonial or religious. It's not grand. It's grubby. It's functional. A literal running tab of who owes how many sips. And this kind of informal, everyday accounting is just as important as temple archives or tax records. Because now, the clay has moved into the taverns. Historians confirm that beer was a staple in Sumerian life, safer than water, rich in calories, and well, who doesn't enjoy a bit of buzz after hauling bricks all day? Workers were even paid in beer. The tablet you're staring at right now. It might not track currency, but it is a record of wages. You ask the brewer how he keeps track of it all. He grunts, wipes his hands on his robe, and waves toward a small pile of tablets by the fire. Each one is a day's ledger. Some baked, some still soft. If someone doesn't pay, he bakes the tablet. Makes it official, he says, winking. This brings up a funny point. Until a tablet is baked, it's technically still negotiable. The clay is wet, literally. So if your cousin pays up tomorrow, the tablet gets re-smoothed, maybe even recycled. But if he ghosts the brewer for a week, into the fire it goes. Hardens into debt history. Here's where it gets interesting. Some fringe scholars suggest that the concept of paying in rations, especially beer, led to a kind of proto-payroll system. Picture it, you dig canals for the temple, haul mud bricks under the sun, and at the end of the week, you're handed a tablet that says, owed 14 measures of beer, 2 baskets of barley, 1 small fish. It's like a pay stub, if your job included regular heat stroke and reed splinters. You think back to a friend who worked on a ziggurat project. He came home with sore arms and a clay token stamped with a barley symbol. "This'll get me fed," he said. And it did. He took it to the storehouse and traded it in for rations. Not coins. Not cash. Just the promise baked into a symbol. The more you look around, the more you see how deeply accounting is stitched into everyday life. Kids are taught their first numbers with little clay sheep. A mother tracks food stores for winter on a tablet hanging beside her hearth. Even priests use ledgers to portion out incense and oil for daily offerings. It's all accounting. It's all memory. And beer, oddly enough, is at the heart of it. One of the oldest written documents ever discovered? A beer receipt. Seriously. It dates back over 5,000 years and details how much beer was distributed to workers. That's how much it mattered. Not just a drink. A wage. A tool of management. You sit beside the brewer now, watching him mark a new tab. A trade caravan came through earlier, and one of the drivers paid for 2 jars of beer with dried fish. The value's been agreed upon. The symbols pressed in. The memory made tangible. You asked him, "What if someone denies what's written?" He snorts. "Then they'll meet my wife." You chuckle. But really, the answer's more serious. In a world without courts or credit agencies, the clay is your contract. Disputes get settled in public, sometimes in markets, sometimes in temples, sometimes just by community judgment. And those who don't respect the record? They don't get to trade again. It's social credit, Sumerian style. Historians still argue whether this system counted as currency. There's no coinage yet. But there's value. There's exchange. There's delayed payment. If you squint hard enough, a bar tab is just a baby bank account. You pull out your own tablet, the one you've been quietly tracking. It lists a neighbor's borrowing 1 measure of oil to be repaid in barley. It felt petty at first. But now, it feels empowering. Clay doesn't lie. And it doesn't forget. As the day cools, the brewer hands you a chipped cup. On the side is a faint symbol, beer, etched by some playful scribe long ago. You take a sip, feeling the yeast settle into your bones. The clay, the beer, the barter, the bookkeeping, it's all one story. The story of a people who didn't just live off the land, they measured it, accounted for it, shared it, argued over it. And they wrote every bit of it down, one wedge at a time. You sit back, tablet in hand, and think, every debt, every sip, every single drop, written in clay. You wake with the taste of barley beer still faint on your tongue and a strange thought in your head. What if a goat isn't just a goat? You shake it off. Maybe you dreamed it. But as you walk through the temple district, that thought lingers, nudging at you like a pebble in your sandal. You pass a priest scribbling something in a clay tablet while muttering prayers. You peek. It's not a list of offerings or a worker's ration sheet, it's a record of debts to the gods. And not just the physical kind. There's a line with your friend's name, next to a symbol for neglect of duties. Another entry reads something like, unperformed vow, 3 barley measures in penance. Wait, are they spiritually auditing people now? You slow down. You've seen this sort of thing before, but you never really questioned it. Temple debts have always been part of life. But you're starting to realize something deeper. Accounting isn't just about goats, fish, and beer. It's about balance. Cosmic balance. Sumerians didn't separate the sacred from the spreadsheet. They believed the gods maintained the universe through order. And humans? You had one job, keep that order. Fulfill your obligations. Give your offerings. Mourn properly. Don't skimp on the incense. If you didn't, you weren't just being rude, you were racking up spiritual debt. Mainstream historians confirm this worldview. Everything had a cost, and if you didn't pay it, either physically or ritually, the gods would collect. Crops fail. Livestock die. Your favorite donkey disappears under mysterious circumstances. Divine vengeance, or just bad luck? Historians still argue whether temple accounting reflected real beliefs or was just a clever way to keep people in line. Either way, the records are very real. You visit the House of Tablets. Yes, that's a real place. And yes, it's as clay-heavy as it sounds. Inside, there's a room just for temple dues. Not just what's been given, but what's owed. There's a column of symbols that's clearly people's names, followed by lists of items. Oil, grain, time. Time? You squint. Yep. Time, tracked in days of temple service. If you skip a holy day, you owe a day back. It's like being charged vacation hours. The gods, it seems, are quite the micromanagers. And this raises a curious, almost poetic idea. You are born into debt. Not monetary debt, necessarily. But spiritual. Cultural. Existential. You owe the gods thanks for your life, for your fields, for your family. So you give, food, labor, ritual, time. And that giving is counted. Weighed. Balanced. You keep the books not just for your household, but for your soul. You think back to a funerary rite you attended last season. A priestess handed a small clay token to the eldest son of the deceased, a symbol of final payment. Not to the temple. To the divine realm. He has paid his dues, she said, pressing the token into his hand. He may rest. It's beautiful, in a stark, Sumerian kind of way. But there's a darker side to this divine ledger. You've heard stories, temples seizing land from families who fell behind on spiritual obligations. A farmer who couldn't provide the expected offerings during a drought. A widow who missed 3 festival days and lost access to temple grain. The system may be cosmic, but it's not always kind. And still, it functions. People accept it, revere it, fear it. You sit beneath a palm tree as a priest passes with a cart of clay tablets, muttering calculations under his breath. You catch a word, me. It's one of the most loaded terms in the Sumerian language. It means divine order, yes, but also the rules, the customs, the very framework of how the world should work. To break the me is to invite chaos. To follow it is to keep harmony. And accounting? It's how you prove you're aligned. Even the gods, some say, keep their own ledgers. The god Utu, Lord of Justice, is believed to record the deeds of mortals, good and bad. There's even a fringe tale, whispered by temple scribes when they've had too much beer, about a tablet in the heavens that lists every sin ever committed. Cosmic debt, awaiting final tally. Sound familiar? You, a modern listener, might hear echoes of this in all sorts of later ideas: the Book of Life, Karma, Judgment Day, tax audits. Okay, maybe not that last one, though it does feel divine in its own cruel way. You get up and walk toward the river, trying to clear your head. You skim a pebble across the water. 1 skip, 2, 3, then it sinks. You remember how this all started, a few simple tokens for sheep and grain. Now, you're counting intangible things. Promises. Sins. Days. Debt isn't just about what you have, it's about what you owe. To others. To society. To the cosmos. And clay, of all things, is what remembers it. As the sun dips low, you find yourself humming a temple chant you barely understand. But the rhythm matches the press of wedge marks. It's all connected. Clay. Memory. Morality. You duck into the temple's shadow just as the sun flares its final heat for the day, and the courtyard cools into that magical in-between, when light hits the mud brick just right, and everything turns gold. You're here not for trade, or beer, or barley. You're here to see the god who keeps the books. Nabu. Okay, technically he's Akkadian, and your Sumerian elders might grumble at his mention, but his roots stretch back to your world, too. He's the god of writing, wisdom, and record-keeping. A divine scribe. The celestial accountant. And let's be real, a terrifying one. His symbol? A stylus. His temple? Towering, scroll-laden, filled with tablets so old they've cracked into ancient jigsaw puzzles. You pass a low wall lined with offerings, figs, fish, and tiny tablets etched with prayers. People leave them for Nabu, asking him to write their names favorably in his heavenly records. The vibe? Somewhere between, "Please bless my crops," and "Please don't audit my soul." Here's the kicker: this isn't just symbolic. People believe in these records. That somewhere, in the divine realm, there's a great tablet. And on it is everything you've ever done. The lies, the debts, the tithes you forgot to pay when your aunt got sick. And Nabu? He's watching. He's writing. He doesn't miss a wedge. Mainstream scholars often focus on the economic role of cuneiform, but they'll admit, there's no clean line between math and morality in ancient Sumer. The clay doesn't just measure goods. It measures goodness. You watch a priestess sprinkle incense onto a small fire before an altar. A line of townsfolk wait patiently, tablets in hand. Some bear trade records, some are prayers, and some, curiously, are confessions. People press their misdeeds into clay and offer them to the god. Fringe theory time. Some historians believe these confessional tablets were meant to be read by temple scribes and ritually destroyed, cleansing the sin. Others argue they were preserved in temple records, an eternal log of guilt and remorse. Either way, they show this bizarre and beautiful blend of accounting and atonement. You peer into a chamber beyond the altar. Scribes shuffle around like beetles in a hive, moving tablets from shelf to shelf. Some write. Others copy. One of them chants softly as he works, like each wedge mark needs a whisper to make it stick. These scribes are more than bureaucrats. They're mediators between mortals and gods. When a farmer pledges part of his harvest to Enlil, it's the scribe who records it. When a merchant swears an oath of fair trade, it's the scribe who stamps it. And when someone lies about their tithe, the clay knows. And the clay will be red. You've heard a story from your uncle, probably exaggerated, that one man tried to bribe a scribe to change the tablet. Just a little edit. A few marks. He even brought honeyed beer. The scribe refused. Days later, the liar's cart tipped over and crushed his foot. Coincidence? Maybe. But you've never forgotten it. And neither has the community. Because in Sumer, your reputation is as much a currency as your grain. And your reputation lives in clay. There's a wall inside the temple that gives you chills. Dozens of tablets, all sealed and signed. No public display. These are the permanent records. High-value contracts, legal disputes, and divine pledges. The ones you don't tamper with. You notice something curious. Some of these tablets are encased in outer shells. Clay envelopes. One layer of text inside, another on the outside. Why? Because if someone tampers with the outer message, the inner one still holds the truth. Historians see this as an early anti-fraud system. Like ancient encryption. If the shell breaks, you better have a good excuse. And guess who gets to break the shell? Naba's priest scribes. You step back into the courtyard as dusk settles. A breeze rolls through, carrying the scent of oil and old dust. You sit by a pillar and pull out your personal tablet. It's simple. Just a few lines, a barley loan, a fish trade, a little space you left blank, maybe for a future promise. Then, just for yourself, you press a tiny stylus mark that means clean. Not required. Not official. But it feels right. Because Naba may never see your humble little slab. But you will. And even if there's no divine tablet in the sky, you still want your story, your account, to be honest. Balanced. Remembered. As night swells over the temple, the stars begin to glint like points on a ledger. You lie back and imagine them as symbols. Constellations as contracts. Milky Way as a divine register. And in that cosmic quiet you think, the gods don't just judge. They record. You can hear the shouting before you round the corner. A deep, rhythmic chorus of grunts, clanging tools, and barked commands echoing off the stone walls of the city's outer ring. You smell sweat, hot tar, and scorched dust. And then you see them, the king's workers, hacking and hauling blocks, building yet another fortified gate. You want to turn around. But today, you're not here to dig. You're here to count. Because war is coming. And war, like everything else in Sumer, requires accounting. As early as 2500 BC, kings realized something crucial. Soldiers, like goats and barley, need tracking. So did tools, wages, supplies, even battlefield outcomes. And all of that required scribes. Dozens of them. You spot them now, hunched over clay desks under a makeshift tent, scratching numbers into damp tablets while soldiers shout over one another. One scribe, barely older than you, jabs his stylus toward a captain who's trying to claim 20 axes. 17 last week, 3 lost in the river. You're getting 15. The captain scowls. But he doesn't argue. Why? Because the tablets don't lie. Mainstream historians note this phase of Sumerian history as the dawn of imperial bureaucracy, when the centralized control of goods, labor, and weapons grew too massive for memory and oral promises. The scribes weren't just keeping track of barley anymore. They were managing empires. You edged closer to a tablet cart and glanced at the records. Rations for soldiers, meat, barley, and yes, beer, equipment logs, troop counts. One particularly large tablet details a campaign against a rival city. It includes expected travel days, supply stops, and names of commanding officers. You blink. It's a battle plan, in cuneiform. Here's a fascinating fringe tidbit. Some scholars believe scribes were present on the battlefield, recording spoils, prisoner counts, and casualty numbers as they happened. Imagine standing in the dust and chaos of a skirmish while someone next to you carefully etches 4 spears lost, 2 oxen captured, into wet clay. You start to see the strategy. It's not just about swords. It's about resources. You don't win wars in Sumer by brute strength alone, you win them with better logistics. You know exactly how many jars of oil it takes to feed a battalion for a month. Your enemy doesn't. You ask a passing soldier how it all works. He points at a nearby overseer. You see him? He gets a list every morning. Who's working where, who's getting fed, who's not pulling their weight. If your name's not on the tablet, you're not eating. So, no clay, no chow. Brutal. Effective. You think back to earlier days, when a goat trade between neighbors was the peak of paperwork. Now you've got conscripted farmers turned part-time warriors relying on scribes to track their entire lives. And the temple's still involved. Even in war, priests bless the weapons, purify the camps, and, of course, review the expense logs. After all, divine favor costs resources. Need to appease a god before a siege? That's 3 goats, 2 jugs of oil, and a scribe-approved offering receipt. Divine intervention, itemized. But the pressure is immense. You watch one scribe drop a freshly inscribed tablet into the fire too soon. It cracks. His supervisor grabs him by the collar, mutters something about losing count of oxen again, and sends him back to start over. You get it. In peacetime, a mistake means a late payment. In wartime, it could mean soldiers starve, weapons don't arrive, or tribute doesn't get collected. And let's not forget, Sumerian kings love their tributes. After a victory, a city doesn't just celebrate. It audits. What was taken? Who gets a share? What's sent to the gods? Who's being taxed now? The scribes document it all. Some kings even have clay victory tablets carved with their conquests, part propaganda, part permanent ledger. And when a king dies, his burial comes with a full inventory. Yes, even the afterlife has spreadsheets. One record you stumble across today lists 24 captured donkeys. Another? A long list of metal goods, oddly specific, 7 bronze sickles, 1 silver hairpin, 2 damaged spears. Of no use. Brutal honesty in war spoils. You like it? By dusk, the workers are slowing. The scribes keep writing. You spot one with ink-stained fingers smoothing the surface of a new slab, whispering as he writes. Not prayer. Not poetry. An invoice. It lists 24 workers, 5 carts of stone, 8 guards, 2 meals per head, 1 crushed toe, no compensation noted. And scrawled at the bottom, King approved. You walk home with a new understanding. The power of the palace doesn't come from its walls or its weapons. It comes from knowing everything. Who owes what? Who works where? Who disappears and why? In the flicker of your lamp that night, you press your stylus into a small piece of leftover clay and write the one thing that now feels truest of all. No numbers, no kingdom. You're woken before dawn by the unmistakable plop of something dense and wet hitting the ground. You stumble out into the narrow alley behind your house, blinking at a barefoot boy holding a fresh tablet, smeared in places, clearly dropped. He winces. First day at school, he mutters. You nod, suppressing a smile. Poor kid. He scurries off toward the adaba, the tablet house, or scribal school, and you decide to follow. Because today, you're not thinking about war, or taxes, or debt to the gods. Today, you're thinking about the kids who learned to keep those records. The ones with ink under their fingernails and dust in their hair. The original office nerds. The adaba is tucked beside the temple courtyard, a modest mud-brick building with arched doorways and the constant hum of recitation. You step inside to a chorus of mumbled syllables and rhythmic thudding as dozens of styluses press into slabs of clay in almost perfect sync. It's as close to ancient beatboxing as you're going to get. The first thing you notice, it smells like wet dirt and teenage frustration. A stern instructor paces the room, eyeing each student's work. He stops by one boy and squints at a wobbly column of numbers. Is this barley or beer? Barley, the boy says, voice cracking. Looks like beer. The instructor lifts the tablet and whap, smacks the student lightly on the head with it. Start again. scribal training is no joke. Mainstream history describes the Adaba as both an elite school and a boot camp. Most students are sons of officials, merchants, or priests, boys expected to become the next generation of record keepers. It's memorization, repetition, and endless clay carving from sunup to sundown. And mistakes? Let's just say the clay is not the only thing getting flattened. You lean against a wall and watch a lesson unfold. Today's exercise: copying a list of workers assigned to canal duty, complete with their daily rations and shift times. One boy scrawls in the wrong unit, using gur, about 300 liters, instead of sila, about a liter. The difference? A catastrophic overpayment in beer. The instructor howls. Do you want them drunk for a month? The room bursts into stifled laughter. The boy flushes. The instructor calms, then shows the correction. It's intense, but the learning is real. The kids aren't just mastering symbols. They're learning politics. Precision. Power. You spot a more advanced student working on a legal contract, loan terms, repayment conditions, the full cuneiform dance. He moves fluidly, stylus tapping like a heartbeat. This kid's going places. Probably the palace archives, or the temple's inner record rooms. In the corner of the room is the tablet graveyard, a basket full of broken or rejected slabs. You dig through it and find a few gems, a list of fish with angry corrections. Not 1210! A draft of what looks like a love poem. Your eyes are like sheep, wait, no. And a beautiful piece of calligraphy with a stylus slip halfway through. Sad, but weirdly comforting. Even the best scribes mess up. You pull aside one student, a wiry kid with ink-smudged knuckles. How long have you been here? 3 years. You like it? He shrugs. Better than hauling bricks. And someday I'll get my seal. You raise an eyebrow. Seals are a big deal. In Sumer, once you complete your scribal training, you earn a cylinder seal, a carved stone that you roll across wet clay to leave your unique signature. It's a rite of passage. It says I am official. I am literate. I matter. It's also the ancient equivalent of a login password and social media handle in one. You leave your seal, people know the record's yours. And if someone tampers with your tablet, the seal shows the fraud. Historians note that seals often include personal symbols, lions, stars, mythical creatures. Some are humble. Others not so much. You once saw one that literally read, "Beloved of the gods, first among scribes, destroyer of errors." Subtle. Back in the Adaba, the instructor announces break time. The boys rush outside, stretching their arms and cracking their backs. You follow, watching them flop onto the warm earth, styluses still clutched in their hands like talismans. They're tired. Covered in clay. One even has a wedge mark on his cheek from falling asleep on a tablet. But they're also something else, the living memory of their city. Without them, no one would know what was planted, who paid their debts, what the laws are, or when the moon festival begins. No ledgers. No contracts. No records. No civilization. And it's weirdly beautiful, this dusty little schoolhouse full of sweaty kids etching the world into clay, one goat and beer jar at a time. As you walk away, you hear one boy mutter, "Ugh, I hate barley math." His friend laughs. "Get used to it. It never ends." You smile. Because 5,000 years later, somewhere out there, someone's still trying to balance a spreadsheet and wondering why their formulas don't work. And it all began here, with bent backs, blunt styluses, and kids with dreams of seals. The market's already alive when you arrive, brimming with shouting voices, flapping linen canopies, and the rich perfume of crushed herbs, fish guts, and roasted grain. You duck between carts piled high with onions, baskets of dates, bundles of wool, each stall its own chaotic economy. This isn't the temple or the king's court. This is the street. And here, accounting has gone public. Gone are the stiff-robed scribes muttering in stone halls. Now you see merchants scratching tally marks on clay scraps, buyers waving tiny tablets as proof of prior payments, and vendors squinting at sealed tags dangling from livestock horns like early price tags. You pass a butcher arguing over a cow's weight, one hand on a scale, the other gripping a tablet. The message is clear: if it's not written down, it doesn't count. Literally. This is the latest evolution of your world's favorite habit, recording everything. And now, it's in the hands of everyday traders. A woman selling woven baskets is the first to catch your eye. She's got a small block of clay hanging from a rope around her neck. When you ask about it, she lifts it proudly. Etched in crisp cuneiform, it lists her goods, prices, and availability for the coming week. It's not flashy, but it's the ancient version of a business card, with bonus features. She tells you it helps avoid arguments. He says I said 2 shekels of barley. I show him the tablet. He sees it was 3. Argument over. She smirks, adjusts her headscarf, and shouts at a teenager who's trying to pocket a fish. You like her. Mainstream historians describe this period, circa 2200 BC, as a shift from temple-dominated record-keeping to more distributed, civilian, use of writing. The clay, once the domain of priests and palace clerks, is now a tool of the people. But don't get it twisted, it's still official. A stamped, signed tablet can make or break your day. And speaking of stamps, the market is full of seals. Not the loud, fish-slapping kind, the carved, cylinder kind. You watch a money changer roll his seal across a damp tablet, the spiral pattern unfurling like a divine signature. You can tell a serious merchant from a poser by their seal. No seal? No trust. No trade. You pass a stall selling dried figs and stop cold. Hanging beside the vendor is a ledger, yes, an actual ledger, like a bakery whiteboard but made of sun-dried mud. On it are etched daily entries, fig counts, deliveries, buyer names. One name shows up 6 times. He's my best customer, the vendor says, grinning. Also my worst payer. You snort. Nothing's changed. A younger boy, maybe 10, offers to write your name on a clay tag for a barley cake. 2 marks, he says, holding up a damp stylus. You raise a brow. 1, you counter. He shrugs and agrees. Negotiation 101. He scratches out the wedge marks, hands you the cake. Is it official? Is it adorable? Absolutely. Fringe detail of the day. Some merchants start developing receipt tablets, small, portable records of who owes what, which could be carried from vendor to vendor. Some even included pictographs for types of goods and little sketches for repeat buyers. Historians still argue whether this was a precursor to credit systems, or just a desperate attempt to avoid endless haggling. And it's not just clay anymore. You spy one trader using a flat piece of waxed wood. He explains it's easier to wipe and rewrite, especially for same-day transactions. It won't last like clay, but it's faster. More mobile. Clay's now for the permanent stuff, contracts, deliveries, big promises. But everyday counting? That's evolving. Even the language is shifting. You overhear a scribe in training telling his teacher, "We need a shorter word for 2 jars of beer and 1 lamb." His teacher sighs, rubs his temples, and says, "Invented then." That's how languages grow, from laziness and necessity, both beautifully human. You spot a shopkeeper using a clever technique, pressing his mark into damp clay tablets before a transaction, then quickly adding buyer details after. It speeds things up, he explains. You call it a preloaded invoice. He calls it not waiting all day for a scribe. You duck into a spice stall and browse. The seller is friendly, if nose-itching levels of aromatic. He's got a curious little thing behind the counter, a tiny chest filled with spent tablets, ones that record fulfilled trades. He keeps them as proof. Sometimes people come back weeks later, say I shorted them. I say hold on. He opens the box, pulls out the slab. And we check. Smart. You think of your own modest stack of clay records back home. Barley loans. Goat trades. A list of who still owes you for that roof patch job. You've always seen them as personal memory aids. But here, in the marketplace, there's something more. their leverage. If the temple gave birth to accounting, the market gave it its swagger. You leave the market with dust on your feet and your mind buzzing. Everywhere you looked, the same rhythm played out: exchange, record, seal, confirm. People didn't just trade things. They traded trust. And trust lives in clay. As the sun tilts west and vendors pack up for the day, you glance back one more time. And there it is, civilization, recorded in crumbling mud. One wedge at a time. You're sitting under a leaning date palm at the city's edge, sun on your shoulders, wind full of sand and possibility. Before you, the road stretches east, rutted and worn by years of donkey carts, sandals, and the occasional escaped pig. Traders move steadily, calling to one another in different dialects, their goods covered in woven cloth and their satchels jangling with something oddly familiar. Tablets. Not local ones. You rise and approach a merchant hunched over a cart of lapis lazuli and smoked fish. He's rolling a foreign-looking cylinder seal over a damp patch of clay. The pattern is unlike anything you've seen: angular symbols, tight spirals, and a bird motif that definitely doesn't belong to your city. "Where's that from?" you ask. "Mari," he replies without looking up. You nod slowly. "That's weeks away by caravan, across rivers and through desert. Another world. But that seal, and the tablet he presses it into, works here. Because the language of accounting? It travels. This is the part of the story most people miss. The invention of accounting didn't stay in Sumer. It moved. Like the merchants who carried their ledgers along trade routes, the technology of clay and symbol began to ripple outward, from Ur and Uruk to Mari, Ebla, Babylon, Assur. Everywhere people traded, they needed memory. And memory came molded in mud. Mainstream historians agree this diffusion began as early as 2000 BC. You see it in the spread of cuneiform across Mesopotamia and beyond. Different regions tweak the signs, adapt the format, add local flair. But the core idea? That remains unchanged. Mark it. Seal it. Trust it. You hang around the caravan a bit longer, watching as traders compare tablets. Some have bilingual records, one side in Sumerian symbols, the other in Akkadian script. You overhear one man explaining exchange rates between barley in Lagash and dates in Elam. Another grumbles about a shipment of tin being short 2 ingots and waves a cracked tablet in proof. You smile. Because even in frustration, clay gives voice. Here's a strange little tidbit. In some regions, people began teaching accounting methods before the writing system itself. They learned how to count, how to track, before they could read. Numbers came first, literacy second. Practicality over poetry. Historians still argue whether this jump-started writing in those areas, or simply delayed it while math hogged the spotlight. And speaking of numbers, have you noticed the maths getting more advanced? Gone are the early 1-wedge, 2-wedge basics. Now you're seeing tables of multiplication, calculations of area and volume. Want to know how much barley fits in a circular silo? There's a formula for that, scribed neatly into a baked brick the size of your palm. A Babylonian trader shows you a curious tablet, an interest schedule for silver loans. It tracks months, rates, and repayment options. The symbols are dense, almost intimidating, but precise. This is more than counting. It's proto-finance. And there's more: weights and measures, standardized across cities. One merchant from Kish tells you he uses a royal standard to ensure consistency. No cheating. No undermeasuring. His scale stones are marked, and his clay tags match the king's decree. It's not just scribes anymore. Now, traders are scribes. Builders are scribes. Even some farmers have basic clay skills. They're not writing hymns or laws, but they are recording who paid for what fence, and how much labor went into digging a new canal. You visit a local warehouse where goods are stored for passing caravans. The shelves are lined with clay tags, each one tied with a cord to a bundle or basket. It's a filing system, but not just for storage, for movement. A date shipment from Ur. A wool pack for Dilman. The clay tells where it's from, who owns it, and what's owed. One worker pulls out a long, narrow tablet, a shipping manifest. He shows you how they mark damages, delays, even weather. Rained halfway. One line reads. Ox broke leg. Another. It's oddly poetic. And somewhere in all this order, something larger is emerging. You realize you're watching the birth of networked commerce. Because it's not just about local trust anymore. It's about distant coordination. You don't have to know the guy in Babylon. If he shows you a sealed, signed tablet with a weight tag and a matching shipment, you trust it. The system works because everyone agreed to remember things the same way. Clay becomes currency. Not the spendable kind, but the dependable kind. This proves what I say is true. Kind. One man shows you his travel record, a personal history carved into small, linked tablets. Trade routes. Completed contracts. Repeat clients. It's a resume in baked mud. And here's a charming fringe theory. Some early tablets may have included basic ratings of traders, think Sumerian Yelp. Fast delivery. Reliable goats. Smelled like onions. No one's sure if it's serious or satire, but you find the idea strangely comforting. The sky begins to fade to rose as the traders prepare camp. Fires light. Bread bakes. And you sit among them, listening to a dozen different languages swap goods and jokes and stories. You see a girl no older than 10 carving tally marks in her slate by firelight. Her older brother corrects her gently. One wedge off, and the whole trade changes. You lie back on your mat as the stars appear, thinking about how far this has come. From temple priests and sealed bully to weather logs, tax lists, and intercity contracts. From pebbles to scrolls of clay in motion. From remembering what you had to proving who you are. And tomorrow? The road will carry this further. One dusty trader at a time. You sit in your doorway that morning, cradling a cup of lukewarm barley drink, watching the soft, golden light creep down the stone walls of the house opposite. The streets are quiet. For now. But you know it won't last. Soon, someone will come by asking for help calculating irrigation shares. Or someone will want you to settle a dispute over a loan. Maybe your neighbor's daughter will bring her homework tablet, sticky with yesterday's honey. You never planned to become the village's go-to accounting mind. But here you are. Because something happened when you started pressing marks into clay. You became part of a system, not just a user, but a steward. And that system is now so deeply woven into daily life that no one can imagine what came before. Not really. You walk into your small storeroom and run your fingers across the shelf lined with clay. Not just numbers anymore. These are stories. Your stories. Other stories. Every tablet a fragment of memory, a container for trust. You lift one at random. A record of a wool trade. It's over a year old, the corner chipped, the name slightly smudged. But the wedged marks are still clear. You remember the day it was written. Hot, dusty, someone was late, and the sheep wouldn't stop bleeding. You smile. Outside, you hear familiar footsteps. It's Nisar again. She bursts through the curtain with a half-dried tablet in her hand and a wild look in her eye. He says I owe him 3 jars of oil. I gave him 4. Look. You sigh, take the slab, scan the symbols, and nod. You're right. Want me to make a copy? She beams. Yes. And maybe add a line about his tendency to misremember. You smirk. Subtle revenge clause. Got it. And so, even now, after temples, after wars, after the market mayhem, you're still doing what Sumerians did from the start, remembering, correcting, balancing. It's funny. You never asked to be part of a 5,000-year story. You just wanted to track your goats. But now you see it. Your hands are stained with clay. Your shelves groan under the weight of memory. You've become a link in a chain that stretches from river banks and reed huts to marble halls and merchant roads. From wet clay to glowing screens. You glance at your neighbor's son scribbling nonsense into a piece of leftover tablet, pretending to be a scribe, grinning like a fool. He doesn't know it yet. But he's continuing the story too. Because even now, in your world of smartphones and spreadsheets, the DNA of Sumer is alive in every receipt, every contract, every cell of every budget you'll ever try, and fail, to stick to. The stylus became a pen, then a keyboard, then a touch screen. But the principle? That hasn't changed. We still need to remember, to verify, to keep each other honest. And it all began with pebbles in a pouch, and someone squinting into the sun, thinking, "Did I trade 5 goats, or 6? Wind down 300 words." So now, as the stars rise slowly above the land that once cradled this ancient logic, let your mind begin to loosen its grip. The fires of the village flicker low. The scribes have packed away their tablets, rolled up their seals, and wiped their fingers clean of dust and ink. Even the merchants have curled up beside their wares, dreams thick with the weight of barley and ledgers left unfinished. And you? You've wandered far tonight. From the banks of the Euphrates to the quiet corners of trade stalls. From the cradle of civilization to the core of your own cozy bed. Let the symbols fade now. Let the tallies melt gently from your thoughts. No need to track anything anymore. The clay has remembered it all for you. Close your eyes, and imagine the soft scratch of a stylus slowed to stillness, the gentle whisper of sand across sun-baked bricks, the hush of a temple door closing for the night. Everything accounted for. Every goat. Every grain. Every promise kept or broken, resting quietly beneath layers of time. You are part of that memory now, pressed gently into the story, like a thumb into warm clay. So breathe deep. Let the ledger of your day close softly, and drift slowly into the quiet hum of ancient dreams.